Thank you for joining us. This is an Infowars.com special report on August 30th, 2011. Report. We're about to interview a very interesting gentleman. He's a journalist. He's an author. He's also an extreme traveler. He interviewed the head of the Northern Alliance just weeks before he was killed. He was inside Afghanistan right before 9/11. He is journalist Pepe Escobar, and his book, Globalism, How the Globalized World is Dissolving into Liquid War, is an absolute must-read. Pepe, thank you so much for joining us.
Great talking to you, Alex.
Well, you have been reporting for Asia Times that al-qaeda has taken over Tripoli and is being handed the nation. The LA Times even admits that the leaders of most of the rebellion are actual jihadi al-qaeda fighters. What can you tell us from your decade-plus research?
Look, I had to confirm. A lot of us came to this information different ways, of course. The LA Times, for instance, The Independent in London, Al-Sharq al-Wasat in the Middle East, and myself, but we got to the same conclusion. The top military guys in Tripoli, in the southwest mountains, southwest of Tripoli, and in Cyrenaica, in Benghazi and Derna, they are all al-Qaeda linked. This means they were and they are still part of the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, LIFG. This is a jihadi organization founded in the 90s to fight against Gaddafi, basically. They wanted to turn, especially Cyrenaica, eastern part of Libya, into an Islamic state and to bring down the central government in Tripoli. Obviously, Gaddafi having that absolutely hardcore intelligence service system that he had, they were fought. They had to leave the country. Many went to Afghanistan and then to Iraq. That was the case of the famous guy of the moment, Abdul Hakim Belhaj. He trained in Afghanistan in the late 90s, early 2000s. He was trained in a camp north of Kabul. Then after 9/11, he disappeared from Afghanistan. He went to Southeast Asia. He was arrested by the CIA in Malaysia in 2003. He was tortured in Bangkok in one of those extraordinary renditions, special CIA prisons all over the world. There was one in Bangkok. Then he was handed back to Libyan intelligence, Libyan security. And he stayed in Libya for the past 6 years or so. But in 2010, there was a deal between the Gaddafi government and these guys from the LIFG especially, over 200 terrorists, let's put it this way, 214 to be exact. And they were freed after they wrote a document, more than 400 pages long, confessing their sins and saying that jihad was over. And of course, they would start, working with the Gaddafi government. So this happened March 2010, last year. After that, these guys disappeared and they surfaced in Benghazi and in Derna early this year after the first demonstrations in Cyrenaica in February this year. And some of them are now in military command posts. Some were trained by U.S. Special Forces, like the Southwestern tribe, Berber tribe contingent that went to Tripoli like 8-9 days ago and took over Tripoli. The military commander was Belhaj, and there were other LIFG guys, al-Qaeda linked with him. But these guys, they were trained in the Southwest Mountains by U.S. Special Forces, so the U.S. knows exactly who's dealing with. And everybody, the French intelligence, British SAS, they know they're dealing with these guys. And it's, you don't need a PhD in Germany to know there's going to be blowback sooner or later, Alex.
Well, certainly. Are we going to end up having a new al-Qaeda base of operations similar to Afghanistan that will then menace Europe, the Mediterranean? And is that what the military-industrial complex is looking for? Use their old ally from the Russian war, now against Gaddafi, and then later, a few years down the road, oh, there has to be a new invasion, fresh meat for the war machine to deal with al-Qaeda. I mean, this is just like 1984, never at war with East Asia, always at war with East Asia.
Always, exactly. No, you're right. Always a war, and this could happen within the next few weeks or months. assuming, which is practically certain, that this hardcore Islamists cannot be part of a transitional government in Libya, or the next government for that matter. In fact, Belhaj last week, 1 week ago, last Tuesday, he said on the record that he wants Sharia law for Libya. Can you imagine? So Gaddafi, okay, hardcore, old world, Cold War style dictator. We all know that. But he's a very clever guy as well. From the beginning, he was saying this was an al-qaeda linked and foreign-based intervention.
Well, we know.
And he was absolutely right, because his intelligence services dealt with these guys on a daily basis, and they were imprisoned by the regime.
Well, that was my next question, because you've been studying this for more than a decade. I remember back in '96, it later came out in the BBC, that the West had tried to use al-qaeda to kill Gaddafi, because Gaddafi was the first person to put an Interpol warrant out for Osama bin Laden. And it turns out now that from the beginning, the rebels were financed by the West, by NATO, by the U.S., and so what's the end game here? Is there anything legitimate about this revolution in Libya, or was it what it appears to be the West starting this from the beginning and using al-Qaeda fighters to start this?
Yes, it's true. There was a legitimate component of the so-called uprising. This is a movement called February 17th movement. A lot of young people, unemployed people, some with good diplomas, by the way, the Google generation living in eastern Libya, they were trying to rise against the regime again. And they had some legitimate demonstrations in early February, mid-February in Benghazi. But then these demonstrations were hijacked by this compound, this motley crew of Gaddafi defectors, al-Qaeda Islamists, British Special Forces, French intelligence, everybody. This was one of the openings. But it was not an opening itself, because the war, or the military coup d'etat, if we can put it this way, was concocted last year, and guess where? In France. The whole thing started in October 2010. Gaddafi's chief of protocol, a guy called Nouri Mesmari, he defected, he went to Paris, he was approached by French intelligence, he said he was in contact with hardcore military personnel, especially in Benghazi, but he also had contacts in Tripoli with possible defectors. They started to organize what will be a military coup, and they said, look, we need a popular component for all this. The popular component was the February 17th movement, because they start to be instigated by a number of sources. Okay, let's start planning demonstrations for February. So when the demonstrations happened, and in the beginning they were legitimate by these young guys, basically, they were immediately hijacked by the motley crew. And then we could see the French agenda at play.